Ladies and gentlemen, nice to e-meet. My name is Winy Maas. I'm the M of MVRDV, architect, landscape architect, urbanist. We have offices in Rotterdam. I'm sitting here in Rotterdam, and more places in the world, especially due to COVID, we have to do it. I'm with pleasure and pride I'm participating to your conference and your lecture series, and that wants to dedicate itself to the role of climate in our design, and especially in the urban and urbanistic context. For that reason, I will share my screen so that I can start. There it is, one moment. Here it is. And I would like to start with, say, a series of observations on your program. It is about contemporary urbanism, and I like that you choose that because it means that we are going to think in the perspective of the city and in the perspective of the development of the city. And you would like to concentrate in that way the effect of climate change and urban space, or vice versa, what urban space can do with and on climate change. And I think that's a worthy position that needs to be sharpened and to be developed all over the planet, because every place in the world is and should take its role in probably in another way. First, to start with, of course, this is just some words about Ukraine, about our situation as we are now facing, an enormous, say, horror, and again, a crisis that will touch us in all its way. So here, an image of our office, how I'm at the moment sitting in the blue room, somehow that's part of that, say, concern, and that is there. Well, in these days of crisis, I would say that we need to show hope more than ever before. And maybe it takes courage to make something beautiful that can captivate attention and that can ridiculize crudeness, is one way of, deal with it as an architect or as an urbanist. That leads then, having said that, or the positions also, I think the discussion on other crisis, the climate crisis, and that we need also beauty to convey the message, of solutions, and to beyond, say, the technical point of view. Climate change and urban space. I would like to start with that everything what we do, we are somehow touching the cycle of water, the cycle of temperature, the cycle of life and biodiversity, and that what we do is interfering in that cycle, helping it or killing it. So what I would like to go through with you in this coming 3 quarters is this series. I want to talk about the monitor, how to measure our influence on this cycle, and then go to the almost, say, chemical substance that's behind it, from oxygen to delta of temperature to water to watts and joules to CO2, and then end with what's next, the perspective of afterwards. Chapter 2, the monitor to start with, and there we can measure our efforts. At the moment, we're trying to do it on 2 levels in the office. One is the carbon calculating, that every time see how good we are in that perspective. And the second element, and especially that has an urbanistic component, is the footprint calculator. The footprint calculator has more elements. Lifestyle comes in, compensation comes in, the bigger scale comes in terms of mobility, and so our food production comes in, because when we're vegetarian, it's anyway better to help the planet these days. So that is what I would like to show. I do that on the case of Luxembourg. Luxembourg is this tiny state of say 1 million people that are the richest on the planet, and what can you do there in such a place? They develop now this Luxembourgian transition program where we are helping them with this footprint calculator. This is an image about Luxembourg in pink, and it's surrounded by Belgium, Germany, and France, so very much in the middle. And already you can see that there are zones of influence. There is a lot of people work in Luxembourg but live in France, and vice versa. The place is quite dense. It has an enormous economical relationship and ecological relationship through the water system. So here you can see how Luxembourg is at the moment. So it is one of the most carbonized countries because of many reasons. And in order to phase it out, to achieve the target of zero carbon in 2050, we have to change our established practices, and on the next time we have to emerge alternative practices and lifestyles that balancing out this natural environment. So this crossing point that we are facing and that we have to accelerate between these two behaviors is what I call this transition into an ecotopia, from say utopia and dystopia to say this element in a central position. How do we do that is the question. Now, first, let's look to the current situation. Some images of the country. There's housing shortages. There's an incredible car dependency. It's super suburban with a lower density than Los Angeles. It is trans-border dependent, which is a good part. And it has quite a lot of monofunctionality in its landscapes, in how it treats the agriculture and treats the forestry. So if we look to the tendencies that are happening in a place like that, then it grows enormously because of the economy and its position. That means also that the gap can become bigger, and that leads to an acceleration need. The government is aware about it, and this illustrates this. So what are the actions to take? First, we say we have to commit, or you have to commit as an advice to the government, to dedicate itself completely to decarbonization. That's one. Secondly, and that goes actually hand in hand, to build resilience to climate change with biodiversity, as well as social and economical stability in the same, one could say, mode. The third step is to imagine for one moment that you could be self-sufficient. Why? Because that helps then to measure what you can do, what you can outsource and what not. And that is also the moment that it becomes thinkable to exchange. There you see the regions around it can help to do it in an intelligent manner, and later we can even export it. How do we do that? There are a couple of, say, land usage that we would, as urbanists, we want to show it in images, and this is what I could call the key of the map. Urban areas, mobility, water, energy, agriculture, and forestry are the main players. They are selected and share different tasks based on how can change to a sustainable lifestyle can be infiltrated in these targets. How can they optimize green practices, and how can they work on a more localized, say, behaviorism as drivers for responsibility and change? That to guide this, we formulated a checklist of these tasks and sliders that see how far are you on every activity. That can be done on a large, on a medium, and on a small intervention. So every, to change a toilet can already do a lot, is what I would like to say. To cover solar panels on cover every roof with solar panels is on a medium level and of interventions. So that is in this, say, in this software. So first on Lux we applied it, and then we went to the interdependent, what they call functional region, the regions around it, and then we imagine even a wider potential. You could do something so good on this place that is also take responsibility of places outside, that you trade it out. That happens, I think, a lot with the different climates to measure that. So how do we monitor these actions and impacts? No, that is say a wide scripting that this team is doing and developing at this very moment. This monitors the impact of a task on carbon reduction, resiliency, and self-sufficiency export, and the land usage that it then requires. You can see that on the right side, it calculates it's out with every piece of action that we do. If we look first to the Luxembourg's footprint as it is now, and with, say, the tasks that we imagine, and measure it with this kind of ordering principle, then you could see that currently it has a footprint of 13.8, which is unusually high. That is on the same level as Singapore, basically. So if we do business as usual by 2050, then we need 14 Luxembourgs to compensate those activities. What we can do technically is, with a lot of measurements, we can bring it to 3.3 for 2015, having this effect of decarbonization. So this could also be done with the help of the neighbors, because that have a lower density, have other kind of qualities, and that means that we then can do this action in an easier way. Then we could do it with 1.5 of Lux plus, is what the footprint in that case means. This has a political impact. That's for the discussion of the different regions. This has also an impact on the speed of things. Could go quicker, even if there's a fallback scenario, and that's what you can see here. This leads, of course, to scenarios, as I say, how and where to take it place. We do that with this pixelized map and to look at the effects on it, and that is done in different, say, land usages, split it into that, and different densities also. Because if you do the overlay, then we know that we need maybe an FAR of 2 or 3 in order to program or to give that program position and to program at that moment at a specific site. I'll give just some examples. To the urban areas, what would happen in that case? So here you see how, if we keep the urban boundary of the first act is don't grow out of the settlements, and even densify the places which are over 100,000, then you get this kind of map. You see the footprint calculator on the left changing. And if I do it even in key commuter cities to use that as a core, then I get already quite an effect. And it is on the map, but also like a stability in the countryside. Even if I imagine to do it only in the Luxembourg capital, which is doable, then you get the densification, which is exciting, I would say. It leads to a kind of Paris density, but it would be also beautiful. And that illustrates a little bit how this slider works. For mobility, the same, that's connected to that, where we can strengthen the public transport or do different means to the rapid train connections, and you see the map changing, and then we can downgrade also the countryside roads, which is actually sometimes also very stimulating. And ban, for instance, through traffic in the smaller entities is also one of the measurements that are taken into account to get that mobility pattern working. Water, also similar. This is the water buffer that is needed for resilience, for not drying out, for forcing a kind of anti-evaporation program also in this area. That can be done in the rivers that widen up the double basically in width. And we can do it also locally around extra lakes. And then you get a kind of Sawa landscape that surrounds this components on that. We can continue also with the forestry part for that balance that I was just painting for this decarbonized country or region. I need to add forestry, even although it has quite some forestry. We can concentrate it in the state of Luxembourg, which is beautiful. Then it becomes simply a national park, done. Or we can do it again with around the water buffers in the valleys and next to it, and then you get this kind of network, which has also another kind of advantages. So these things help a little bit to not only make acts and but also to see the impact of a certain kind of act in it. To end with energy, similar question: how can we do it with agrivoltaics, and then always in a double layer, so that you can still harvest below, and I come back to that later in the lecture as a tool to do it. Then this is what needs to be covered in the landscape. And if we do also some windmills, it is needed according to many people because of, yeah, say vulnerability, then you already need this amount of energy landscapes to be put in. This is a lot. There's a lot of discussion on the windmills if you want them everywhere, because you also become crazy of it. So that is a little bit the task. Now, then with overlaying that combination and interaction, you get then this, say, scenarios and this, say, directions that come together. This is then done on the integrated map, and we can then zoom in. Here you see some of the zooms to illustrate it more physically what it can do. So I give you an example of S-sur-sur, a beautiful part that around the lake, the current lake, this kind of effect is needed with this kind of hypothesis, and that leads to this painting of the villages and towns that surround it. If you translate it to the map, how it's now, then this would be effect of the extra water that is needed, this extra sawa zones that are there and that lead to this balance on a certain term. So how it looks now, it will then transform with the new basins in this kind of landscapes of the future. Is it good? Is it bad? It's for judgment, and that comes in. I'm very happy that the process is now starting to develop it more deeper after, say, the first, say, half year of study on this calculator, and that it's combined with all the juridical and political forces in this country and region. I go to the next subject. Now to go into, say, the chemicals of our architecture and urbanism, say, oxygen. We did this study on the Green Dip, a book which comes out soon, where we look to the urban mass, urban areas that is about 3% of the landmass of the world, and that's larger than India, I would say. And when you compactize it without roads, it's more or less like Madagascar. This Madagascar place has 56% of the people now, and will be in our decarbonized environment 68%. And they behave actually heavier, because that means that the cities of the future, the environment of the future, are responsible for 70% of the CO2 emissions, of 60% of the fresh water consumption, and 75% of the energy use. If we take this to a global scale, we can see that we would need to compensate already 3 times of the planet to balance that out. And that leads to compactization, also finding out techniques and technologies that improve that and that compactize that. For instance, hypothesis, if this is Hong Kong and I would greenify that completely, how much would the effect and the contribution to these different components that surrounds the oxygen measurements? Or if I do it in Beijing, then suddenly Beijing becomes like wonderful, I would say. So we developed this green maker with the Y factory in the TU Delft to see how far we can come. It's basically a program that shows all the species of the world and what they need in terms of soil and temperature, water management, clipping, and what they give in terms of temperature drop or evaporation or water captivation, noise reduction. So if we apply that knowledge to products that you can buy in Walmart or in IKEA, and to see how that tile would look like, or a roof, then I know what I can do with such a kind of material to improve it. If I then apply it on a canvas, like in this case, a piece of Manhattan, somewhere 160th Street, I guess, and what can we do on that place? So I mean that I can choose material, I can clad that over our soils, our roofs, and our facades, and into our interiors, and I can see what this piece of Manhattan, how much that would help. Quite a lot in that way. That is more than I expected. And also, I mean, this is a beautiful Fifth Avenue at the moment, and it becomes somehow much nicer, you know, when you go around and you see how Manhattan from a brownie becomes a greenie, and then later to this kind of interiors, is what this effect is showing. So what would that mean if we do that with all our flat roofs only, so not only the facades? Then, of course, the albedo will go a little bit down. The biomass continues and goes up. We produce plus 8% of oxygen, and we drop temperature with 1 degree over the whole planet, which is substantial to do that. This goes hand in hand, of course, with biodiversity as the next task to do that. The book that we are now preparing also in the Y Factory is to calculate more or less the habitats that we can produce with that. So that's based on this food chains that is then interconnected and calculates basically the surface and the treatment that's combined with the products that I was just painting and applied on canvases like below on this slide. You see some of the products with different companies being made and how that could be then imagined on the facade, on the roof, on the streets, and lead, like in this case of the North French town of Lille, to somehow kind of, wow, this is better than, say, Borobudur suddenly, and how, say, our fellows are living in this. How far do you come? I don't say that the wolf will be here immediately, but all kind of amphibia will then also be in the center of our towns. And do we hate them then? And do we want to protect ourselves against mosquitoes? Of course. But then you have to compensate that again with other kind of birds and other kind of, say, predators that are helping out in our exercise. How do we apply that then further? So I give you some cases, how in Rotterdam, for example. Rotterdam used to be like nice, like cute, Middle European, and then boom, it was bombarded in World War II and flattened out. And at that moment, it led to an urbanism of objects. And some people say it's bad, and they refer sometimes even to Las Vegas. On the other hand, if objects are nice, kind, if they show generations, and if the next generation somehow has respect of what was before, but adds or compensates, then it actually is kind of intelligent dialogue. It's almost like egos become we-goes. And that's what's happening a bit in Rotterdam, and with this kind of, say, responsibility in combination with respect. So we do some of them, but here one, I want to show you the depot, the art storage building next to the Museum van Boijmans, and where this is the park made by OMA in combination with Yves Brunier. But it has one issue, it's floods, and even more the last 10 years than ever before. So it has to deal with more urbanity, more it has to deal with parking garages that block the soil, and so that things are stopped, and that occurs here. And that also made the problem in the museum quite worse, so that the Monets and the Picassos were suddenly also flooded. You see the director at that moment of disaster. So what can we do then? We want to make a depot that is needed, but we don't want to put it somewhere in the outskirts. I think it's good to have it in the city so that you can visit it, a public and open depot. But the budgets are not sufficient. You need another, say, 40% to pay for that facility, as you can understand, because it needs more attention. There's a lot of technology involved. There are places to exhibit, and there's more personnel needed. So this is in this, we try to raise that money, we got it, and then we are applying it now on this site. So here's the site. There is, of course, routes in the park. This is the program. Ooh, that's big for a park to put that in. So how can we make a building that loves the park, or that people start to love and to understand that it contributes to the park? By making it, say, circular, you can walk around, no corners, no danger when you walk around. We shrink the footprint, minimize it so that the plaza is big enough and that the effect on the foundation is concentrated. Then you make the roof terrace, say, as big as possible, and that leaves then space for all this routing. If you then clad it with mirrors, then somehow we could imagine that the plaza looks bigger, that you can look around the corner, and that you can see more sky, and say, echo the famous paintings of the Netherlands of Ruisdael and of the 16th, 17th century. And it's then a way also to host the trees of the park and to put them on the roof and turn that into a collective extension of the park. Then I could imagine with that it forms a part of the park, this sequence of rooms, that's the museum park in this case, that have been made over time, where this is the front room that is then advocating the relationship between the small spot and the bigger part. Because it would change this perspective to this. where I can see myself, I see the artist, I can see the canvas, I can see the park, I can see the sky, and I can see also this Fata Morgana on the roof. This has been made with the least amount of impact on the water inside. So small foundations, tube foundations are made, a bit wobbly, they're stabilized then with this ring on top, and that leads to this, it's actually a kind of boat that has been constructed in this water level. That's been cladded with mirroring glass made in Shenzhen, made by computers, triple bent, so quite the good thing with glass is that you can recycle it and bring it back to the oven, and then you can do it again if it doesn't work out. And that is how it's tested. And even the lowest part is the most flattest, so it becomes horizontal, so that it expresses also that this Ark of Noah is floating almost on top of our sea. Then you make doors, and doors that are like James Bond are opening itself in a kind of slow way, so it's perfect. When it's closed, it opens up, and then you can go into this depot, celebrating the opening act of an archive building. And then you enter basically this prison, you can say, but where all the 50 different, say, climates surround this space, in a space where you can walk through, and where all the travelators and all the lifts are in, where many boxes are hung to show the art, to pull it out of the racks and to show it here, and to understand. You can then look from the back to the art and to the front. You can even walk over it at a certain moment. And then the surrounding streets, you can open the windows and the doors, you can look at it, you see this random collection, no, not random, scientific collection of different, say, buildings, different, say, pieces of art. And they are sorted by material. Paper has another kind of climate than paintings. And then you go in and you can open the racks, and you can, with the help of the people of the museum, and then find this collection. And actually many surprises when Ruisdael is next to the Mondriaan, or amateur art is combined with high-end art. So the journey continues. You look more up, you see more art. Your temporary art piece where pieces of the collection are gathered and turned into this carpet where you can walk over it. So you can walk over the Mondriaan, I would say, and see how the effect would be on that moment. And then you end your walk on the roof with a restaurant, which is an art restaurant where things are brought in. Every space helps to get a piece of art in it. And you end in the forest. I want to show that forest because it is kind of tech forest. They are planted. These trees they're grown the last 4 years. They have flat roots, and these roots are intertwined so that we make this connective soil. They are shielded by windscreens around it, and with the pockets in between the buildings, and that lead to this experience. So this is after 1 year of planting now to be seen as another place to exhibit. And with that, we get this machine. It's an art machine, but it's also an urbanistic machine, where again an object is found in Rotterdam, but this one has almost no facade. It is a facade of us. It represents us and makes us aware where we are and also at night, where this canvas is illuminated by pipiloterist and by different artists that are out of the collection, and that somehow is reflected in a three-dimensional way in this facade. Somehow you find then was a way of being in a three-dimensional, say, piece of art at night. And here a film during the tests, how that feels with Pipilotti, and how that can be imagined now every night, these artworks that are there. This is what you can see at the moment in Facebook of the last days, for instance, and how one of your newspapers somehow explain about it, that in the end Rotterdam has even a nicer skyline than Manhattan. I find that an amusing momentum. I bring it to the next one of how to install this kind of green dip. I take you to Amsterdam, to the local business district, and where we add a new mixed program, which has this volume according to the urbanist. 3 towers and a plinth, but you know, it happens everywhere, where we scrape away these towers so that I can make terraces and bay windows that help each other and bring it to the bottom, so that then I have like a scraped way, say, new block that shows the transition from a classical environment, which I still respect, this a business environment with mirror windows, and then bring this new life into that. And I plan together with Piet Oudolf this green valley and test how it will grow with, say, planters that are part of the houses, no, not sticking out in that way, but part of the whole operation, and then becomes this kind of object with this kind of render images that we know. And of course, this need to grow, I'm aware, and Piet warned me also that takes time. So we need to train our plans like we did in the depot. And that's what we currently are doing. We need to script that complexity because of the wind, the sun hours, the costs of developers. You see it inside and outside. We have to check the sizes of the terraces and the windows. And this program also, again, balances this out. And that is transformed and in this rivet model with a structure behind it, with all the ductwork that's needed for these landscapes, and to bring it in, and leads to this building as it is now. So I take you to a walk through this valley, where people live and can bring the beer to each other. And every Saturday, I imagine there will be barbecues, and the building will turn into a smoky area, I would say. And people have always these trees as part of it. The irregularity makes housing that is somehow has always an extra space where you can sit or where you can put a thing that you couldn't do. And then we can walk. Here you see on one of the sides of the building, I'm going to go up with you. I see the valley appearing. I see the addresses in this, say, race, and in these stairs that are there, and turn you in the end to the bottom of the valley, where I have lakes, and through the water of the lakes, I can see the grotto below of the program of the museum, and one of the headquarter buildings, the companies that are in it, part of the filtration system, how it is from this grotto to the and then I can continue the walk with this new plantation that's getting there, and then lead in the end through other kind of ponds of this full water circle to the other kind of, say, dropping down. I enter this part of this test of this green dip with the dream of the developer. This is what he put in his brochure. And then I think, wow, what I did, I think in the Manhattan case, this could come everywhere. We continue. Mannheim, next year, we make this hill based on top of supermarkets that to get rid of the boxes that are normally built, and that becomes a viewing point to look over the city. Here, how it will be built in wood. We do it like this. You see it happening with the soil and the debris that we need of other buildings, and then put this forestry on top of it, and we add one building. It's a remnant of the military base, the American military base that was there, to give it almost like a pedestal. And here how it will look like, how now the renders are made, and the technology of the hill has been developed, and how you can walk later over this, and how, say, the woodified building of the former bases is part to be, say, respected and shown, and how it sticks out over the entrances with the high rises that surround it and lead to this intervention. We are under construction at this very moment. Next chapter, Delta T, the change in temperature. I spoke already a little about it with the green dip, but still we try to do it in more ways. I give you an example in New York, where we split it, a high rise, in more volumes to enlarge ventilation through it. So it's an 181st Street next to Amsterdam Avenue, where the surrounding is this kind of blocks, this brownie blocks, with a lot of colorful, say, plinth for a very mixed, say, population in that area. So we thought it's maybe good to use that format, but also to demonstrate that these block sizes could be stacked and turned into a high rise, and to introduce this kind of vertical village on the on this part of Manhattan, and make that very clear that whenever you come from LaGuardia in the future, you see it as a token. It's a mixed program. every block has another entity. In between, there are streets to go through it. So here, how this stack has been imagined with the hotel, with the housing, with the offices, with the bride room, and with the marrying room in it for this kind of population, referring to how the users can do that, and taking the scale of the surrounding and glorifying it. Yes, there's a brownie in it, but there's also a bluey in it, or a greenie, and that leads to this object that wants to be slightly more gay than its fellows that surround it. And here it leads to the slits in between, where we can work with the detail. And this is the situation as it is now, how with this different tiles we can make these blocks and turn it into this device of partly cooling through the wind channels the environment in this part of Manhattan, and make it also a more social. We continue with that, say, methodology in Detroit, in this area, which is the heart of Eastern Market, the beautiful area in Detroit, where a lot of things are happening, where you can walk around, and where it has this kind of artistic atmosphere. The sense of doing things is happening, and it has murals all over that express it. It's a beautiful collection of artists that interfere to their different festivals. So Bird's block is our block, former boxer and former jazz group, Jazz Cafe is on that spot. And so we worked with the government and with the neighborhood to make a program that's mixed and that turns into a village that is not only a known village, but also a three-dimensional village, a pile, as we call it. And this is how this pile looked in the beginning, how it is, how it also is a ventilation piece to create a combination of shadow and sun during the year, with wind and non-wind also during the year, so that this different climates, Detroit can be minus 20 degrees Celsius or plus 30. So how to mitigate that with an urban environment that can serve both. And then we asked 20 blocks for the 20 artists to help us to make the facade and to somehow petrify this art. And you see it here, how that would be with the murals printed in glass. How you can walk around in this climatic, say, in between narrow spaces, and how they become kind of almost like a gallery plaza or an art village with all the program inside, housing, hotel, some working spaces, and some commercial spaces up to the group terrace. We start with block one, building one on this spot. That will be an existing building with murals that we need to demolish. We make a new massing. We push in because of lobbies. We push it out to create setbacks and also ventilation components. We add an element on top, and then we start to imagine that with 3 artists, we are going to work on this stackification. So we start with the bottom, inspired by and work with this artist, put that on the historic layer, turn it into this, say, painting as it is now designed. We go with the next artist, with Shivi McFly, that wants to do this. And then with this openings, he accepted as the windows, and with a changing morale, a new technique that with a group of artists that makes this one. And that leads to this first, say, advertiser of this neighborhood, an extension of making density, but combine it with this climate machine that we can imagine on that spot. I go further to Bordeaux. Bordeaux in France, southern city, quite hot. How to deal then with climate change on this peninsula, which is a former, say, military base for Napoleon, with a lot of tracks and a lot of halls. We said, okay, let's use the traces of the past. That's the base for the urbanism. There you can build upon. Then you have in between narrow streets, 6 till 10 meters, depending on the certain elements. And in orange, you get the inverse pieces. That leads to a beautiful, say, pattern by coincidence of streets that looks like Rome in a way, or like southern cities, where I don't need everything for driving, and I can have places like here in Amsterdam where you simply can sit. If you extrude that, then I get this almost Hong Kong-like feeling. So that is not the issue. But if you trim it, these roofs, and you say that you want to live on ground floor, 45 degrees, I get actually a wonderful roofscape. And if I also modify, and I will explain that later, the sunscape on the different directions, north, say south, east, and west, then I get this. And if I then apply extra open courtyards to have a natural ventilation, and I work with 126 architects on it, and I use photovoltaics and energy on the roofs, on most of it, then this is what I get. So here is the model with the streets, with this amazing, I would say, roofscapes that are like a sculpture that address, say, the climate answer of this area. If I walk to the future promenade, I see this happening. It's combined and it's super rich. And it's based on these principles. On the left side, you see what it is in summer. I have a sun, and then I need a tree to protect, to shelter it, beside what the buildings already do. And in the winter, it's the opposite. Sun comes to the lowest space, also in the street. And I use naked stems to do that. And that arranges the climate in Bordeaux. And that has been tested in our computer models, how it is with and without trees. So on the left side, you see how it works in the middle of June. In blue, you get, say, cooling effect. And on the right side, you see also when, then because it is only, say, a couple of percentage that is shaded and cold. This is then the planting plan that we need and how it will look like in this combination of whitish volume for the albedo effect. Reflection is needed immediately, and the greenification of, say, the sun stopper in the summer, and how that mixes with these narrow streets and different sizes, by the way, to this kind of green gutters. This is helped by the water. So there is a river next door to it, and we keep the water under the houses. In basins, every house makes a basin. That is helps to store the water, but also to use it in the dry periods for the trees that I was just doing. And you see this kind of cellars that are there. You have to change the law a little bit and have another kind of, say, insurance system. I'm aware the Dutch do it already a long time. This has been applied now in France also. And then we build it, like here, the products that are there. And when I am in Bordeaux, I see stuff happening on the other side of the river. If I go there, you see this kind of basements appearing. And if I, like Pompeii, and if I go to this Pompeii, these are the cellars. These are the places where the water is kept. Then they are making the small and narrow streets, and you can make it higher when there is a widening plaza. You see the effect in this situation, and then the albedo elements come in to transform it in this whitest environment. And here with the trees, we start to plan how that streets and cute streets are made, how the ventilation, the open blocks in the back are now planted with these trees and with another kind of material to cool it down, how the links are made between the streets and this courtyards, and how now this kind of mountains are appearing in the landscape of the Garonne and the landscape of Bordeaux. Next chapter, water. I already talked about it in Bordeaux, but Tainan is what we try to do there has an effect on by using water on different levels for the popularity as well as for the cooling of the town. This is Tainan as it is now. It used to be lush and beautiful in the middle of Taiwan, but it became this kind of horrendous gray city. And what here is happening, you see a Chinese department store that could be transformed into a plaza. And can we use that plaza to cool the environment? So here, that's what is happening. We are getting rid of the buildings. We keep a part as a kind of ruin that helps to have an inertia to store the temperature in it. And then we add water in, you see a fluctuating bassin where you can swim, where you can go to with plants that keep the temperature up that we imagined in this case. So it's made by a new kind of concrete that extends, and that leads to this usage that became very popular because it's the coolest place in town, literally and figuratively, to hang out and to be. And it's completely public. You can eat your sandwich. It's just like Central Park in this place, but where the trees now grow and keep that temperature in this pocket. And that becomes like a refuge basically for day and night. That's open 24/7. Kids are going to swim, and also you see a transformation of the inhabitants that gradually, in Denmark, you would of course swim outside. In Tainan, it was not so obvious, but now it's happening. Next chapter, I go to the watts, the energy part. And a while ago, we worked on Grand Paris, 10 years ago, and that now is in the also developing acts like in Luxembourg we do to make that city better. One of the acts is what we call the solar park of Paris. It means that all the roofs, any new building, but also the renovations of building, you have to have solar panels that would transform that. And if you do it, you can have one extra floor. There you get already a lot of tax income by that, so that helps a lot to do it. That would transform then this kind of known Haussmann-oriented Paris into something like that. I know it's a shock. But on the other hand, here you live with this new potential, and now we're making products that fits in the zinc, in the material that is combined with that, so to have it adapted. So I'm super happy. 10 years to start with it. Now it's all over. You make an act and you transform Paris into something more contemporary. At the same moment, we're also working in Taipei, here on the coast of Taiwan, for an energy company, Taipower. We make their new headquarter building, and we said, let's make it completely in solar panels. It's all calculated what kind of panels we need and how to position them, and with what kind of say devices we can do, and also transparent ones for the windows for the offices. And that leads to such a kind of demonstration almost of what a building can look like, and how an headquarter can demonstrate it and have more energy than it needs, give it to the neighbors, and you can, like I did in Luxembourg, a little bit of an effect on the fighter's sense. I am currently under construction as a beacon on the edge of the island, like Eastern Island, more or less. You can find this solar monster almost coming up. I take you to Penang. Penang is a piece in Malaysia. Here you see it is an island, and then I take this notion into a next step. Penang is growing. More people are living there. It's one of the harbors of Malaysia, and it needs to facilitate that with new housing areas, and wants to do it in a nice way on this part of the coast. Here you see how the current sea is with fishery moments, and how to add then new islands in it. So how can you do that? On that, it is needed to relieve the pressure. So it will create this new metro line. It makes a new urban concept for the island, and creates space and attracts people and avoid brain drains. And it leads also the moment to allocate reallocate the airport that's now on the island, to put that in the bay in between with this islandification. This is the base model plan. They first thought 3 islands. Now we said, no, let's make more, so that you can have more length, more infiltration also by fishes and by the tide, and then shape it so that they funnel it towards certain directions and spread out again. And gratuitously, you get this kind of 3 flowers almost in the sea. This is the distance to the shoreline, how the flushing corridors are broader, how the internal flushing canals are narrower to create this pressure difference, and how they create view lines between the islands. This creates breeding grounds for fish all over, with tidal landscapes that manage that fish production and biodiversity. How it's connected with the kind of zigzag line, how it leads to this greenification, and how we use a solar pergola for shadow and for creating an optimum, say, energy balance. This is the new solar forest, as we call it, and that is based out of this kind of elements that are on top of the buildings that help to make different, say, ventilation movements that you can do and improve the comfort. So here a diagram of exposed to the sun, how the temperature would be a lot of red, how with solar protection it would already become more yellow and better, how with air movement it becomes even more green, and how with greenery we could even, like in Tainan, we could do it even more. And that, especially with the waves that are coming out, it helps to do this ventilation and creates this kind of, say, pergolas next to you and on top of you. That is combined with this plantation, another kind of plantation underneath that is needed, leading to this kind of facades, this kind of plazas. And then in the end, of course, surrounded by these ecological landscapes that I just was talking about, how that cleans the sea, how it gives breeding grounds, and this kind of beaches, to turn that into these islands on the coast. As we speak, we are working that also in Shanghai, where we did this as a prototype for a new headquarter building, where this device is now mounted on the new building, wooden building, where this ventilation shaft is done to combine solar cells with cooling. So this is the sun production that we do, the green terraces and the ventilation for the offices, and the capture of water that we can do on these terraces. And that leads also to a kind of binding inside and outside for people, a sustainable machine. CO2, the next chapter. And again, into Paris, we work on, of course, to more and more, and everyone is doing that. And I'm very happy that Congress is also taking part in how to deal with wood. So you see one of the wooden buildings that like we are doing, with, like you are all doing with CLT, to create this kind of houses and make this kind of units, that it continues. In Mannheim, a next step, how we try to do it in a kind of rack, and so that they have also more shadow on the edges. And you explore basically at the moment, and I think that's an interesting component all over, and that you cannot do everything in wood, that you need sometimes for fire coating concrete, or for inertia, for climate, also that kind of elements. And that is so different in many countries, that we are trying to make this comparison all over the world to see how far we can woodify and turn it into this kind of, say, buildings. So here's the German example. Happy in Sydney, another example, how to make also high rises out of it. You see an example here, say there are pieces in steel and pieces in wood, and you have to disconnect them by a slit of ventilation and a slit of protection. And that leads actually to, again, to what we try to do in New York and in Detroit, that also that can be done in a wooden version. You see how the structure is imagined as the slits of steel between the wood, and can lead to these ventilated spaces in between. The ventilation goes into the cores in these atriums and leads to this wooden offices. I end with what's next, of course. And I just show you that we are not stopping. I mean, we need technology to invest on it, to consider it, and to see how that can help to change our climate-proof and climate-helping urbanism. And that here some expectations what we can do in the future in the coming 150 years. 3D printing is happening, but we need, in order to have the next 3D printing, we need to have a recyclable 3D printing, which can be, and even on and like on time to do that, to make it more reversible and all this irreversibility. So that counts for every technique that you need to be, that needs to be helped. I'll give you some examples. What if we look to microtexture, so to mushrooms, I would say, and the development of mushrooms now in the coming 100 years, what you need to add, what you need to change to facilitate and to have this petrification and to reopening act. Then it's these dreams appear and show a section of Rotterdam, and how gradually over every decennium you can imagine what kind of, say, mushroom environments that can be, from minimum in the beginning to this beauty in the end. If I do the same with trees and I try to, say, intervene with them and manipulate root systems and manipulate connecting systems and also redo them from in the beginning algae, but in the end with willows, to do that in other species, then also that would happen, that you start to have this kind of algae buildings, and gradually it become like more, say, plant-oriented buildings, and they turned into, and I know this is a silly example, but it's a beauty if that could happen. And then I transformed not only Manhattan a while ago in this next year to maybe a place that grows and that changes over time. And then I would have to sublimize basically all these components into, say, one direction. And with that, I do hope to give you, to illustrate how we can intervene in this cycle with these ingredients, how we have to calculate and monitor them to be sure how much we do. And that extends BREEAM and LEED at that moment and turns it into an international device. And with that, I do hope that urban space and architecture, that is a device within that, can help to work on climate change and will be the new contemporary urbanism as you demand for it. I thank you very much. I do hope that you give me some reactions on it, and that I hear from you your observations and your critique, because in that way I only can go further. Unfortunately, I couldn't be with you, but I hope directly in live. I hope to see you soon, though, with when we are opening up again more and more. Till soon.